Welcome back to our PCT Short. I'm Jonah Johnson. So as we conclude the first week of June and we get into the second week of June, hopefully a lot of you will get caught up with your plantings and won't have to shift around much maturities. But just to leave you with some thoughts, need to start thinking about considering a couple things with our soybeans and corn hybrids. And so first about soybeans, we need to narrow up that row width. So if you're a 30-inch row spacing guy, if you have RTK and auto steer, if you can split the difference and make them on 15s, and then if you have a drill and maybe you planted beans, just trying to bring anything down between 7.5 and 15-inch row closure, because research on seeding population row widths show that 7.5 to 15-inch row spacings yield statistically similar. So we just need to close that gap on our row spacing so we can close our canopies as fast as possible. Next, we need to talk about seeding rates. So our seeding rates right now, we're looking for, when we get it here into the middle of June, we're looking for 150 to 170,000 seeds per acre. Our goal is to have final plant stands at harvest around 125 to 135 plants per acre for this time of year. We can have a smaller amount of plants earlier in the season because there's longer growth season, and what we're wanting to encourage are these plants to be in vegetative stage as long as possible. And then because once they switch to reproductive stage, they're going to slow down in their stem elongation. So what we're hoping for is to get as many nodes out there stacked up in that plant to have more flower set and more pods to maximize yield potential. Lastly is on maturities. So we want to look at, based on here on your screen, you'll see you want to choose the latest maturity possible that we can plant before a killing frost that allows you the most time out there to grow. And again, that's just to get size on our soybean plants. So now let's switch to corn. So like I've said in the past, I'm comfortable with waiting, in my opinion, to the second week of June, staying the course on what the hybrid you initially selected to plant. But if we get to the later part of June, that's when we got to start thinking about bringing those CRMs to shorter season corn. So I don't think we need to take drastic numbers, but work with your seed people and select hybrids, because later planted corn with earlier season hybrids typically have yields similar to our full season hybrids when the full season are planted earlier. So I wouldn't plant the early season hybrids early, that they're out of zone per se, but once we get into the middle part of June and later, that's when we need to start considering that. So pick a hybrid that based on maybe your experience, or again, our seed people will really help you place those hybrids that will work for the middle, the later part of June. Lastly, think about GDU accumulation compression. So that, like we mentioned a couple weeks ago, that's when we essentially need about roughly 7 GDUs per day less to reach maturity on hybrids than you would if you planted in early April, for example. So every day forward, we need less heat units, because those hybrids sense that they're behind and they speed themselves up, and we've witnessed that for years. So just something to think about, that you can still tinker around with certain CRMs or your maturity days. And the only caveat would be is if you had, for example, like a 108-day hybrid and it flowered like a 112-day hybrid, that's going to have extended moisture in that plant because of its longer flowering and later flowering window. And so those are just some things to consider when you're pinpointing those final hybrids if you have to shift to an earlier hybrid CRM. So if you have further questions, follow us on X or PCTnutrients.com. I'm Jonah Johnson. Thanks for watching.